Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. Today we have The Last Ice. This is a documentary from National Geographic, of course. It's an hour and 21 minutes. It's from 2020, and so it's very, very recent. It's added just in the last few months on Disney Plus, and this is very much, as I suspected yesterday, about climate change. Yes, but it does not focus simply on climate change as the only topic. This is in order to bring it home, in order to bring the effects of what climate change is all about, to how it affects. They don't bother with graphs and charts and statistics and everything else. They look at the people, and they look at the Inuit people who have lived there for thousands of years, and and have been treated as less than human, as colonization spread throughout the world, whether it's from Europe or from Canada and the Americas and everywhere else. I mean, obviously their story isn't anything new. Unfortunately, colonization has made an effort to bulldoze over centuries or eons or whatever of culture in favor of the more predominant and more modern culture. We've seen it with, obviously the Native Americans in the United States and in Canada. In Canada, it'd be the Inuits for the most part. We've seen it in Australia. We've seen it India, everywhere else. Anywhere there's a backwards native, a backwards native culture community. In this case, these are nomads for the most part. Uh, well, when it comes to somebody who needs it more, apparently, in order to make money off of it or scrounge its resources, well, screw the people who lived there first. So what we see here is an area up in the Arctic, ice melting through a very direct interaction with nature. By the end of the film, they tell us there are more than 900 industrial projects making their way or already well established in the Arctic, specifically in the area around Greenland and northern Canada and things like that, and between Norway, Finland, stuff like that. Of course, across above Russia and Korea, they're looking to create shipping lanes. They're drilling for oil. They are disrupting the migration patterns of whales and the lives of polar bears. And yes, they do touch on a number of how it affects the animals and how it and the sea life and everything else. And you can see that it's not just as the ice thins, life becomes more precarious, not just for the animals but for the humans. And I mean, there was once a time that there was a not fairly solid, there was a solid chunk of ice that was connecting Canada with Greenland, Greenland. That was safe. And nowadays, it doesn't take much for it to break up. And of course, there's a couple shots taken from onboard icebreakers that just go plow through that area and in search of whatever they want. The struggle for autonomy, a struggle for having their own part of the world safe from the incursion of others, has been going on for a very long time, but also it's still very recent. Even just the last two generations, since the 50s at least, they have the 1950s, not older than that. They were the Canadians and from Finland, I believe, because, yeah. They were pretty much saying, hey, everybody who lives here, You are now going to live over here. Or if they were nomadic and they moved all over as depending on the weather, the seasons, and the hunting and everything else, all of you that we see, you are going to go to this piece of land over here, and you're going to stay there. You're going to build a community. In many cases, also, those same people would take their children, separate them, because when you're dealing with older people, you're not going to change them. But when you take children away from their parents, you can teach them to be white. You can teach them to not be Inuit. You can teach them to believe in your God as compared to whatever they believe in their culture. I'm not going to pretend that I know. I'm not an expert on the Inuit people or anything else. You notice I'm not saying Eskimos because I understand that it's not a preferred term. Let's just say it's sort of it's not a very positive term. There's a lot of footage showing, taken from I guess the 1950s and 1960s, showing news reports on how the white man's moving into town and these people are so backwards and different, and they're now wearing our clothes and they're becoming human now, which they didn't say that exactly, but it's kind of implied. This is a heartbreaking, not for the most part, but it's very heartbreaking to see that it doesn't. There's not a corner of this world that we as humans aren't just horrible to anybody different than us when we have the opportunity. But like I said, this focuses a lot on the people in this, and we focus on a number of people. One man who has been fighting for the lives, for the culture of his people, and I can't say the name. I'm just gonna screw it up. It begins with a P, and it's a very long word, and I can't pronounce it. But he's been fighting for their rights for decades, and as of the filming of this documentary, he's still around. And it took 25 years from this time that he started going to these meetings and fighting for their rights and everything else for something to actually happen. And it was in the 70s, I believe, that something actually changed. And things are still changing. Things are still being worked out. But meanwhile, even after they were given the Nunavut part, I don't know if it's a province of Canada, is it? Canadians might know, maybe not. But there's a province up in that area where they had most commonly lived and hunted and everything else. And by the way, their biggest trade pretty much is hunting. By the way, if you didn't figure this out already, there's not a whole lot of vegetarians up among the Inuit people because there ain't a whole lot of green up there. So you can't exactly be jumping on carrots. And when they do get anything that is not native to that land that they haven't hunted for, it costs an enormous amount of money. Just buying like a block of cheese is like $20, something that you would get for $2-3 here. And that's an old report that we saw in the video. It probably is even more now. I realize I'm all over the place on this, but we get to see a woman who is fighting to retain the culture in her own life and amongst her people, amongst the young people. More than 50% of the Inuit people alive right now are under the age of 25. It's I probably shouldn't tell you all this. You should watch the documentary. If this is something that matters to you, if it's something that you care about seeing a culture that you're probably not familiar with. I know I'm not. I learned a lot from this, but seeing how this affects individual people and the culture as a whole is transformative. It's a heavy thing. So you get to see this woman as she struggles with making sure that the next generation understands where they come from, that their language is not forgotten. She's admitted that even as she was, as she grew up and she moved into more urban areas and sort of left her area behind, she now barely knows her native language. and it's something that she's working to retain, not just for herself but for others. There's another man who had no intention of ever becoming a hunter. He lived in Ottawa for a time, and he was given some dogs, and he realized, well, these dogs started making more dogs, and well, I guess it's time to be a hunter, make use of them, and continue in his family's ways. And but he runs into a whole lot of the trouble along the way, and you get to see his story as he struggles with his identity and who he is, and you get to see just what these people as a whole go through. There's a high suicide rate amongst the people in those areas, whether it's due to isolation or lack of identity and resources and health. I mean, mental health has got to be a humongous issue there, but it's probably a thing where people are like, yeah, you know what, we're just going to get therapy out on the ice. It's not going to be a thing that's going to happen too easily or too commonly. But yeah, there's multiple levels of struggle throughout this, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a downer. There are sparks of joy throughout this, good things that have happened, but it's only through a lot of struggle that those bits of happiness have been accomplished, and there's so much more to do. So I think this is, if you ever get the opportunity and the time to watch something like this from National Geographic on Disney Plus, it's worth your time to check it out. It's you deal with the animals, and there's some rough moments in this, but yeah, it's the people, the animals, the environment. It's all connected, and when one goes, so go the others. Why can't they just move somewhere nicer and they can live? And if you still say that after you watch this, it means you weren't paying attention to what anybody said. It's that simple. I mean, because that crossed my mind at the beginning too. Why don't they move to some place where they can thrive and and not have to live on the ice and kill and eat seals and polar bears to survive, and fish and everything else? Yeah, it's important you pay attention. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I got to say about that. It's not the happy-go-lucky, oh my gosh, this is such a great, fun film. It's not fun, but it's eye-opening. So, and I think that's just as important. Everything can't be a princess or a Star War. So on Disney Plus. So yeah, I'll leave it with that, and we'll pick tomorrow's episode.
35.
What do we got here? 35. Way down below. All right. We got a sequel here. This is a follow-up to a movie that we've already seen. This is a Disney animation, animated film. And it's cool that I finally got to see the original before the sequel. And we finally get to watch the sequel. This is Atlantis, Milo's Return. So Milo's back in Atlantis, and we'll see what adventure unfolds. I think this is the direct-to-video sequel. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see you back here tomorrow with Atlantis, Milo's Return on the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you then.